Hello, and welcome to my next Executive Series video. Our topic today is process validation, with a specific focus on process validation traps. Aaron Snyder here from Quality Systems Explained, where we make quality systems simple for you. If you're new, make sure you subscribe to get all the good content. Check out the status bar below for our agenda, and stick around to the end to get those bonus questions. Our topic, process validation traps, links directly to the process validation requirements, which come from 1345 section 7.5.6 and 820.75. Process validation traps in 5 words. Process validation commonly made mistakes. As you look across the industry, when it comes to process validation, there are a number of mistakes that repeatedly happen time after time after time across the industry. Here, we're going to talk about 6 of those. The first is poor planning. I know everything comes back to poor planning, but in this case, when it comes to a process validation, the poor planning comes directly back to not allowing enough time for process development and for documentation, drafting, reviewing, and approving. Each of those steps takes a lot of time. You need the time to do FATs, factory acceptance tests. You need the time to do design of experiments, to understand how your process parameters interact and to understand the variation in your process. You need time to draft the documentation, to route it for approval, to get everyone to approve it. Not allowing enough time leads to failures and complications later. Second, deviations. Either we ignore deviations, or when deviations happen, they're not captured, or we just accept deviations and move on without doing an investigation, understanding the impact on our validation, and really thoroughly addressing that deviation before we move on. Third, not having the appropriate statistical rationales for our sample sizes and not doing the appropriate statistical analysis, like normality testing, on our data sets. Many organizations will just default to 30 samples. We'll just do 3 runs in our PQ, won't test for normality. All of those are common traps within a process validation. Fourth, the product that's made during the validation runs themselves, whether they are some product that's made in an IQ, if there's some rudimentary performance testing, or product made in the OQ, or product made in the PQ, that product is not controlled and it's not dispositioned appropriately. Fifth, validation elements start before the previous element is done. So my IQ is still going on and I've started OQ. Or my OQ report is not signed off and I've started PQ. All of these different issues with starting the next phase before the previous one is complete often leads to problems and questions and deviations later. And then finally, operators normally who execute the validation, whether they are validation engineers or production operators, they are rarely trained to the validation protocol or the documentation that they need to ensure that they understand how the validation is supposed to take place. So training of personnel who execute the validations. So how do I know this is working? Well, first, I have appropriate planning. I give my engineers enough time to do the upfront development work and also to draft and review and route their documentation for approval. Second, I capture and address deviations every time consistently, and I have a very thorough and rigorous process for addressing deviations within my validations. Third, I have a lot of statistical tools, a lot of training to ensure that my statistical analysis, my sample sizes, they are all good, they are supported by data, and the analysis done, all of the data sets are tested for normality and handled appropriately. Fourth, any of the product that I make during my validations, it's immediately quarantined and it's dispositioned in the final reports. Fifth, I complete the previous phase of my validation before I start the next one. And that means that that previous phase report is approved before I move on to the next phase. And then finally, I ensure that I capture the training of those who execute my validations. I capture that training on a training form and it's attached to my validation report. How do I know it's not working? Well, we really already covered this in the first section when we talked about the traps. When process validation isn't working, you fall into all of these traps. Go back, listen to the beginning of the video. That's how we know it's not working. And now for the 3 bonus questions. How do we plan for process validations? How do we ensure that there's enough time for our process validation, the development work and drafting the documentation? Second, what type of training do we have? What type of support tools do we have for validation engineers to ensure they do appropriate statistical techniques, not only assigning the right sample sizes, but also doing the right data analysis? And then finally, how do we ensure that operators are trained to the validation protocols and the various other supporting SOPs before they execute the process validation? Thank you for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, and comment. Send any questions to me at qms.jedi@gmail.com. This is Aaron Snyder from Quality Systems Explained, making quality systems simple for you.